Hey, so I guess I didn't do any reviews or anything yesterday or any drawing. Oh, that just reminded me that I really want to draw three things. Um, what I've been watching the last couple of days is The Wire series three. So I've seen The Wire from start to finish a number of times, and towards the um end of last year, I watched series one because I was intending on watching all of it. Uh, um, and I watched just the first series. So the other day I was thinking about when Omar and I think his name's brother Musone or something, when they kill Stringer. And I watched the clip, and that made me want to watch the third and fourth series. It gets a bit weird in the fifth series. I want to watch it because there was some conspiracy shit in there, if I'm honest with you. There's a guy who's in The Wire series five, and I remember him saying some shit and me thinking, whoa, that's extremely fucking weird. That's an extremely weird thing to say. He also then plays the character in Breaking Bad, uh, who Jesse murders at the end of like series three. He's the chemist that they bring in to replace Walter White. And I also remember him saying some weird shit in that. I think he mentions Pfizer and something else. Strangely, they do call their brand of heroin in The Wire or crack, whatever it is. I'm guessing it might be heroin because I think that heroin would be easier to make into different things that you could refer to as brands, whereas as far as I know with crack, you just wash it up and it's crack. Um, I think with heroin, you might be able to use a different type of plant, or you can probably do that with cocaine, actually, to be fair. Anyway, and they call it pandemic. And for ages, they're selling the drug dealers are selling pandemic. And I thought, I don't think back then in 2006, 2007, I knew what a pandemic was. Or I would have known what a pandemic was, but we'd never had a pandemic. Anyway, yeah, so I just wanted to because I get a feeling that when I've rewatched The Wire, because I've just rewatched it and streamed series one to series five, I think that maybe by series, even though series three and four are in my opinion the best two series, um, it's almost weird because I feel like Barksdale and Stringer were the best villains. However, I feel like series three and four are really where I mean the Barksdales were in series three, but I feel like series three and four there's a lot of growth in series three in series four and three of the main characters. So I mean, I guess it starts out with what happens at the start of the series. The towers come down. Um, I've there's it is what it is really. I mean, they bring down it's almost like a death of some parts of the kids that have grown up there as sort of like childhood. I don't really, like I said before, I don't really need to talk about what that represents or anything. Like it just is what it is for me. Obviously, The Wire is a series written by a police officer and a journalist uh, who worked that area, Baltimore, I believe. I can't remember their names. I watched another really good series by them, by one of the guys. Maybe his name is David Cross or something. Cross Crucifix. Called The Corner. I remember that being really good when I watched it in about 2007. I think it came out about 2003, 2004 maybe. Had a lot of the same people that were in The Wire. I remember it being good, if not like a tiny bit lame, but deep, man, and some great characters in there. Um, So yeah, uh, the Wire series three. So what happened after the towers are brought down? Bodhi's a big part of this series. Big fan of Bodhi. There's some deep shit with Bodhi, and he always just seems to like bounce out of it. Hit like when him and Poot have to shoot his best friend. That's a really deep scene, man. I remember the first time watching that and being like, "Holy fuck! I don't want to. This is difficult to watch." The bit where Bodhi and Poot sort of take him up to that room. And what's deep about that is that he's looking after all of his kids. Do you know what I mean? Like I can't remember the kid's name, but he goes on to be a really famous actor. He plays Creed. He was in Fantastic Four. He's been in loads of shit, man. And he plays that guy in The Wire. And yeah, that's a really dark scene, but they just seem to sort of bounce out of having to kill their friend. I guess it is what it is. But Bodhi, big fan of Bodhi and Poop. Big fan of Bodhi as a character. Yeah, he just seems to deal with like dark shit after dark shit. Collapse of his industry in this series, with Stringer and with Avon getting sent down and Stringer getting murdered. Uh, just watching the straight up collapse. Really big fan. I don't remember Slim Charles being in this. I don't remember Slim Charles being in this series. It being in series one and two, maybe he was. I think that he is he's a much bigger character in this series and huge fan of his energy. He seems like he is doing a great job of acting in the role of somebody insanely believable in terms of being a character. Huge fan of the Slim Charles role. Also, Cutty comes into it in this series, which I think Cutty's a good actor as well. He's also a great character. He's also like, what's great with Cutty is like, he comes out of doing a long stretch, um, and then commits a load of like low tier crime, but you can tell that he doesn't have it in him anymore to kill, which you think is sort of weird. You think he's still hanging around with loads of gangsters and murderers in prison. And you think like with what we know about prison, it seems a little bit strange that he's come out of it cleaner. That doesn't often seem to happen, and I guess it doesn't happen to a number of the other characters that come out of prison. But he comes out of it and he wants to change and he can't murder anymore. So he sets up a boxing gym, and all the kids that are going into the boxing gym really enjoy it. There's the scene where Slim Charles shoots that kid, and then Cutty runs up and that other kid falls over in the alleyway and he has him in his sights and he doesn't shoot him. Um, and for me, I thought, wow, that's and then he quits the game at that point, and you think, well, that's really cool, man. It's really cool that Avon lets him out because you don't think I don't think that that happens a lot in real life. I'm not sure. Never really been that deep into any games before, but like I don't think that that happens where people just let people out of a game like that. Um, there's also the whole thing where he then after being let out, he goes back to Avon and asks for some money to start up a boxing gym, and Avon gives him 5 grand more than he asked for, and you think that's also a really cool, but definitely adds a human element too, because you think, oh, is he maybe playing this off like it's nothing because it's something that he thinks is important? Is he giving him this money because served a long stretch and didn't snitch? Do you know what I mean? Is he recognizing that maybe he was an elder in his community when he grew up, so like he wants to do something for him. Is it a bit of all three? Some some touching shit there, and you think it's a bit weird with regard to like I guess I always try to look at like what happens to the characters in terms of like what they're doing within the series. So you look at Avon, he comes out of it and he wants to. You look at what happens at the end of the series, and Avon obviously ends up in prison. Stringer ends up dead, and you think, why did they deserve those? Why did they deserve those things? I guess Stringer orchestrated a lot of murder, even though he's a even though he doesn't want to, he seemingly wants to get out of that life. It seems like, it seems a bit weird how they punish within this because it seems like Stringer just wanted to get out of that life, right? And it seems like he did what he did in order to survive. Basically, he wanted to be successful, and in order to be successful in the place where he grew up, the only way out was seemingly drugs or police. He chose the drugs route, and at a point where he got successful enough that he tried his best to get out of that, right? So you think it's weird that he ends up with the punishment of death? I guess it's one way of saying if you go into that game, it's either prison or death or drug addiction. They're the ways out. Whether you're police or, like police seem to get it a bit easier because they have the opportunity to make money and go into the political side of it a bit more. But if you're choosing the drug side of it, your ways out are prison, death, or drug addiction. There's seemingly no other way out. Cutty seems to find a way out, but the rest of them just dead, really. I guess maybe Cutty's finding a way out because he goes into that job in gardening, and then he's trying to help the kids grow. I guess that's maybe why maybe that's why Cutty doesn't really. I don't think Cutty dies. I can't remember series 4 and 5. I can't remember exactly what happens to his character, but I don't remember him dying. Um, also this series brings in Chris and Snoop, and what's the other guy's name? It's a bit weird because like I do think that what's the gangster they work for's name? I don't remember what his name is right now, but like I always like I used to think, oh, his character's cool because he's sort of like cold and he doesn't talk a lot. The scene where Avon tries to set him up with that woman, I think it's maybe Dee's ex-wife or something, and where Avon tries to set him up with that woman and he fucks her once and then realizes who she is, shows up at her house and just shoots her twice in the chest and once in the mouth, and you think, holy shit, man, that is deep. Um, and yeah, like I guess them coming through in this series, like I remember them being a bit of a bigger part. I guess it seems like they're a bigger part because Avon ends up dying, and Avon ends up in prison, and Stringer ends up dying, even though both of those things are not actually anything to do with the young guy. He goes to war with Avon, and they both lose the same amount of people, I think. You think that maybe what this is a message for is like, you think that what it is maybe is like Avon has been to prison for 2 years, served a 2 year sentence. He should have come out of that and gone, now I don't want to go back in. And you think Stringer did everything to set up moving into a normal lifestyle, right? They're still making money off the drug game. But you think that if he got into the political game, he probably wouldn't have even needed to make drugs off. He probably wouldn't have wanted anything to do with making money off the drug game anymore. I think maybe that's not the case because the politicians are taking money from them. So that's probably indicating that if you go into politics, most of the time there's that many people making money illegally that you can't even do them really unless they do something extremely bad. You can't even do them because it bring it brings down the whole system. You can't have a ton of politicians looking like they all take drug money. Maybe. But you think like at that point it was everything was set up for Avon to come out of prison and to go and for them to work in a legal, for them to begin to work legally and make the money that way. And you think that maybe that's a way of saying, oh, these characters have gotten old now. Why are they trying to go back to the drug game? That's what I guess I'm thinking from that is like maybe the young guy, whoever Chris and Snoop work for, he should have just stepped aside and let that young guy come through so that he could follow a similar path, and that maybe at that point they should have, after he'd served his years in prison, after Stringer had made everything running a lot more legally. They should have just moved into the legal world, and maybe that Stringer died, and Avon ends up doing 10 to life or something. He gets a long ass sentence, I think. I don't think you actually see the sentence. That they say you're going to serve out the rest of your sentence at least, and then we're going to try to get you done on conspiracy to murder for 10 to life. So you think, well, maybe what the moral of that story is if you ever go to prison and you get let out early and you have an opportunity to make money legally, then take that opportunity, because otherwise you're more than likely going to end up uh, dead or in prison. And if you escaped death or a long prison sentence before, then you should probably take that opportunity to evade those circumstances. Maybe that was their message. I don't know. I also thought of Stringer Bell. Strange name that. I mean, like I think that's one of those things that you shape, isn't it? And when you ring it, someone comes running. I was also thinking of the bell curve, and that maybe it was maybe the name there is some sort of shot because he's that clever that he outsmarts the police. Like the police finding it impossible to catch him, and they're losing so many of their own men and women. Kima getting shot in the first series. Um, that guy that gets shot in this series, I can't remember his name, Dojiman or something. All of these different police officers get shot in this attempt to try to uh, get Stringer on some sort of charge, and you think that maybe that was the writer's attempt at a shot there on saying, if you're going to write a book saying that black people are stupid, I'm going to show you that they're not. Based on work that he actually did within those communities. I figured that that's maybe what that was. Barksdale, dog, you know. Um, Yeah, so Omar in this series is he takes a bit of a loss at the start. He does that cool thing where he does that cool thing in the start where he's using the outfits and he dresses up as the disabled person, and they manage to. I do think that's a little bit unrealistic, but what I'm taking from this is that a lot of this is based in a time. I'm assuming that a lot of this is based in the 70s and 80s because if you're a retired cop in 2005, you're probably basing a lot of your shit on the 80s and 90s, right? And he's basing it on real people and shit that he actually saw and the shit that actually happened, with obviously a little bit of dramatic effects like added on top of it. So you think, well, did he just base a lot of this on shit that happened? But you think people probably wouldn't have gotten by. Maybe I'm not sure if people get if people are allowed for this to happen. If people would have allowed for this to happen in like 2005, whenever this came out, people might have been too smart for that. You know, I guess 2005 would have been prime like burner time though. That's the whole concept of burners is brought about in this series, and you think that that's probably, I would say that like 2000-ish is when phones started coming through, so that's probably like an accurate depiction of the timeline of when burners started blowing up, like maybe 2000, 2001. Just buying the cheapest phone possible, buying a load of the cheapest phones possible and just dashing them after a week so they can't be traced. Nowadays, obviously, they can just track your voice. They can just track I mean, and they've been able to do that for like 15, 20 years. They can just track your voice match it to any listening device. And they've been able to do that for probably 20 years now. So, anyway, um, but I think that that was hidden within the intelligence community until at least like 2010 sort of times. But yeah, like obviously Omar is based on Donnie Andrews. I did think that maybe making heterosexual drug dealer into a gay guy. I don't know if that was merging a few different characters or if that was a way of making the coolest character in the show gay so that a bunch of people wouldn't want to be that guy, you know. I didn't quite know, or maybe it's the other way. Maybe it's trying to strengthen the gay image in that community. You know, maybe it was trying to get people to say being gay is okay. And you would think that maybe that was the purpose because there are a ton of gay rappers now who are pretty fucking big. You've got like three rappers that came out in the last maybe 2 years as gay. Um, so you would think that maybe it was a push on bringing about the on strengthening the sort of feminine movement. There's all this shit that KRS-One was talking about in the mid 90s about how the UK version of the Bible, the English written version of the Bible, is an amalgamation of the pagan Druid religion combined with the German translation of the Latin Bible, of the Latin Christian Catholic Judeo Abrahamic Bible, and how if you read the Bible properly, then what it's actually foretelling is in the new millennium, in the year 2000, that what's going to happen is we're going to be moving more into a um, pathway for a pathway to bring about the age of feminism. I think it's called the age of Pisces, I believe that we're in now, maybe. And that the fluidity of the motion of a fish swimming is supposed to represent something to do with the rise of femininity. Um, and obviously within femininity becomes a rise in their style of sexuality, and you would think that since the 80s that has been coming around a lot more. You know there's tons of transsexual films that were from the 80s, right? There's also but you do also think, well, there were bare trannies in like fucking Victorian times, you know, like, so you do think, However, I'm not quite sure if around the, like, quite obviously because of the times that like I've grown up in, those times didn't bring about an age of feminism. You look at all the Andrew Tate stuff and everything that's like, and I'm not, I'm not saying that Andrew Tate hates women. I don't really watch any of his content, but like, you look at all this rise of white power, male hatred again, and it seems to be worse than it was when I was younger, and you sort of think, well, does that indicate that, like I've been saying, through all of the like rise in the feminist movement, I remember having a discussion with a deeply with a feminist that was on the side of, yeah, we need to cut these dicks off. And my opinion was, don't you see that what you're doing, like everything that like this, everything that sort of like these pagan Christian people seem to value is that every action has a reaction. And don't you think that what you're doing is just as bad as what the men were doing to you? Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're a woman that goes, yeah, they're locking me into my prison, I firmly believe that they did use physical violence and programming in order to not have women go, yes, we need one partner to stay at home and raise the kids and the other partner to go out to work. I think that what happened was you took away that choice from women. It's what I think a lot of religion does. It takes away the choice. This is why I have a problem with organized religion. It takes away the choice and it brainwashes people into doing things that would maybe not be doing if they weren't brainwashed into that. However, I think that when you go, yes, I want my freedom, and then what women in the feminist community seem to have been driven towards was, yeah, what we're going to do now is we're going to drug a load of men, suppress their hormones, uh, and there's like so much porn that is like, I don't think that a lot of men know about this shit because they wouldn't ever watch this type of porn, but like there's a hell of a lot of female domination porn, which basically will have like crucifixes in the background of the image, and will be women talking about how they are like, it will sometimes have transsexual dudes in the video, and the woman will be like, this used to be a man, this used to be a heterosexual man, and through my uh, you know, brainwashing, I was able to get him to bang hormone suppressors up his arse and get him to have a boob job and get him to cut his penis off, and now he's a woman. And you watch a lot of this shit, and there's so much Christian imagery, they'll literally just have crucifixes in the background, and you think, yo, I think that when women started to go into that realm, and especially what they were doing there was like they weren't going after the men, that they were punching down, right? That they weren't punching up the pyramid. They weren't going for these men who are orchestrating the brainwashing of their children. They weren't going for the men that were orchestrating putting these women into prison. What they were doing for the most part was still fucking those men and calling those men daddies and shit because they had money. And more often than not, they seemed to be attacking sort of men that were more inclined to be on the side and to understand the fight of and plight of women. And I think that that might be why you have a rise in like I like to see things in a universal way. And I think that personally, the pendulum always swings, doesn't it? And I think that maybe when you the generation, and you always have these things carried out on the sins of the father, all that shit, right? And I think that maybe when you've been a generation of women who have gone, let's cut these guys' dicks off through drugging them, through like putting them in situations almost akin to ghettos where churches orchestrated men being friends with girls by pushing them out of their male circles into being friends with girls, and they created an impact on those men's brains akin to the same way of shaping a human's ways of thinking when they are poor. That you sort of get what you're given, don't you? And now your daughter might be growing up in a world where it's going to be way worse for her than just being put into a kitchen and making food for her kids. Because seemingly, like, I'm now seeing mass stabbings of women and little girls. Do you know what I mean? I'm seeing a rise in Islam. You might be having, if you're a liberal-minded person, you might be about to be embracing a Muslim movement, which is going to put your daughters into like masks. I have something against all religions, just by the way. If you think that I hate Islam, I hate them all just the same. But you might be, due to all this rise of racism and all these riots, which I'm going to do a video on in a minute after I finish this, you might be about to see your kids uh, raised in a society where just being liberal-minded people, it means that they're going to take the side of a very fascist, in my opinion, movement. You know, putting women in chains and making them wear a mask. For me, that's forcing anybody into anything. Forcing anybody into anything through threat of violence is not good. But I think that this is what might be happening right now. You might have grown up with. I'm thinking back to another conversation with a girl who let's say played the role of like cutesy little girl a lot better than the other girl that I'm talking about. Um, but had a very strong like any time a man got taken down, put into prison for like Kevin Spacey or that whole movement, she was extremely yes, get in sort of thing. And I think that now a lot of those people might be maybe are bringing about a time in which their daughters are going to feel this shit so much worse. Can you imagine if like because like for me, this is what's going to happen now with this war that's I'll do this later on. I'll come back to this in a bit. But yeah, I think that maybe the Omar character was intended to um was intended to help bring about a rise in the gay movement in the US, in the black culture in the US. Omar in Islam was a seed that grew into a full blown tree uh, that bore fruit. Maybe that's why they made him gay. Fruity pebbles and shit. Um, Omar was the architect of Islamic civilization. Wow, that seems like a beautiful metaphor. I do really like a lot of the allegory that's within religion. I do. I don't think that you can ever have something written like that. I mean, I don't really know the story of Omar, but I don't think that you can ever have like a short explanation of who Omar was in Islam makes me go, wow, they really do have some beautiful teachings. Do you know what I mean? Like a human being, the Caliphate of Omar was a seed that grew into a full-blown tree and bore fruit. Obviously, fruit is something that they perceive to indicate as an allegory or metaphor, whatever, for life, feeding its people with sweetness, you know. And you think that for a religion to be based on um, such beautiful imagery, you think that there must be a lot of good in there, you know. Anyway, so Omar, yeah, I think that like he's such a cool character, like obviously a Robin Hood style guy going around and robbing drug dealers is like being somebody that is inherently violent and can't avoid what has happened in his life. Being a character that is basically based on someone saying, "I can't avoid what's happened in my life. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to murder the shit people in that pathway in order to get rid of them." You know what I mean? Like to rob the money from the people making money off trapping up addicts, to murder the people who are essentially doing like a long drawn out version of murder on these people. You really think that that's a great character within that story, and he's just cool. He's just I think that's the actor bringing a lot to that character, but like the whole trench coat thing and nearly always having a shotgun, the way that he talks to people, the way that he never backs down, when him and Brother Musoni, whatever the guy's name is, the guy that wears the bow tie, the tuxedo guy, when they get Stringer in that building complex in the and they catch Stringer and he's got nowhere to go and Omar's got a shotgun pointed at him and the guy in the tuxedo's got the water PPK pointed at him and he says, what do you want? You want money? I'll get you all the money that you could ever want. And Omar says, you just don't get it, do you? And you think that's really like a phenomenal bit of TV to show that there are people in this world who can't be swayed, who can't have their morals swayed by money. Do you know what I mean? That guy has to die. Omar's going to get his money and his drugs through whatever means. Do you know what I mean? He's going to get that money and he's going to get those drugs. He's also an addict, so he's going to get that drug. He's going to get that. He's going to get those drugs for him. He's also going to get those drugs to give out to all the other addicts for free in the area that he lives in, so that the addicts don't go out of their way to fuck him over. Do you know what I mean? So he's almost like picked up a way of like he protects his community that's been ravaged by addiction by robbing the drugs that get given to those people so that they, even if they were to like psychologically it creates something where they're going, well, he gives us free drugs, so why would we give up this person that constantly gives us free drugs and money to eat and shit for people that are making the money off us, so and not caring about our lives in order to murder us from giving us drugs. Do you know what I mean? Why would we give up this guy that's showing us how to get free drugs and free money? Um, I think that that's essentially what that story is based on right there. You know, what's happening within that story. And so you think he's gotten a way of like managing to manipulate money into getting all of his people free money and free drugs if they just don't give up his hiding space. And you think that that's really cool, you know? It's a cool little addition that you have to sort of put together yourself a little bit. Butchie is a great character, the blind guy that works as his bank. He's a really great character. Um, Yeah, the death of Stringer is really a fancy because you sort of like Stringer in bits, but then you see some of the stuff he's doing and like because you know this show it sort of paints some of the snitches in a good light. Omar snitches in the first series, he just goes straight up and just puts that tie on over his hoodie and whatever and just says like and makes shit up about that guy that shot the witness or whatever, right? Because he just doesn't like the Barksdale organization, so he's like, I don't give a fuck, I'll play both sides of the game. I'll rat on you quite happily. Like I don't give a fuck. And then there's the D'Angelo. You really start to feel for D'Angelo. I think it might be the first series or second series where D'Angelo dies. You really start to feel for him because he feels bad for these people. He feels bad for these people that are getting murdered, and he sees the consequences of these people's lives and how they're destroyed after they have these people within their communities or within their families get shot dead. And you really feel for D'Angelo before he dies, you know, because he's not necessarily trying to rat on his family. What he's trying to do is he's seeing the moral implications and he's seeing the financial implications and he's seeing how these people, these human beings, die and have their lives and families' lives destroyed after these people are murdered or after these people are trapped up into drugs. And you really feel bad for some of the snitches in this. You think like, fuck man, I feel really bad. Some of them are just doing it to save their own skin. Some of them are just going, I'm going to save myself here and I'm going to save myself a long drawn out sentence. One thing that it doesn't indicate is like from a lot of like police. I read a couple of undercover books and I also read like a couple of books on the psychology of serial killers and the psychology of criminals. I read a book that was written by this fucking knobhead. It was really hard to read, but he basically was just basically spitting on the criminals that he was talking about and just talking about them like they were shit. But that from the one that I read two books about police officers. One was an MI5 spy and one was an undercover, and he basically said that he only ever arrested one guy who they were giving who they threatened with like a reasonable sentence and who didn't just give up everybody around him, including family and friends. You think like that's a pretty strong indication that like, and he had a lot of respect for this guy that didn't give up any of the people, right? But he was basically saying everybody gives everybody up. Do you know what I mean? As soon as everybody is threatened with any sentence, everybody gives everybody up. And I think that that's probably true, you know, because a lot of criminals and that's why when The Departed was released, uh, there was a lot of articles in my hometown newspaper saying that the characters within it were pretty much bang on the characters of the major drug dealers in my society. And you think, yeah, of course they'd be. How could you have major drug dealers getting named in newspapers over and over again and not be working with the police or the CIA or MI5, military intelligence? How could you have them not working with the police and not being arrested? Do you know what I mean? It's crazy. Anyway, so. Yeah. What else happens in series three? The whole bit of Stringer going to the guy who legalizes the drug game. So that's something I haven't talked about yet. What's his name? Not Carcetti. Tommy Carcetti coming through in this series is cool as well. I think his name's Tommy Carcetti, the white Irish actor. There's some really great American accents in this. I'm not American, so I think for me I can tell what some English actors do terrible American accents. Um, but like I feel like Stringer Bell, what's that guy's name? Idris Elba, and I can't remember the guy's name that plays Tommy Carcetti, the Irish guy, but both of those people. I feel like they do. Maybe Tommy's not quite as good, but I feel like both of them do really great American accents. I had no idea that Idris Elba was English until I think I'd seen all of The Wire until I saw him in an interview or doing an English film, and I thought, what the fuck, man, that's crazy. Because even on the rewatch, you don't see that anyway, But maybe if you were from Baltimore, maybe you'd notice a little bit more. I don't know. Um, yeah. And Tommy Colsetti's is a great character. He's the right kind of slime, really, to play a politician. Because he doesn't necessarily seem like a really bad guy. He just seems like someone that's fallen into what the political scene is in that city, right? Do you know what I mean? He doesn't really seem to care about morals that much, but all he's doing bad within the sort of moral realm is he's cheating on his wife a bit, which you think is bad. But most rich men do that, right? And you think a lot of rich men that do that, they're pushed into it by other men saying, like, go on, show that you don't care, show that you're cold. So he cheats on his wife a bit. Uh, he's not quite making money off death in the same ways. However, he is acknowledging that what the police do, he knows how the police work, and he makes money off a system that knows how the police work. Even down to Bunny Coleman. Um, Talking about how the brown paper bag worked with alcohol and him bringing around that legalization of drugs. It's so crazy to see the politicians that jump on that and go, it's wrong. It's so crazy to have a whole storyline where a guy basically walks up to his department in West Baltimore and says, listen, when we put a paper bag over alcohol, it meant that all of a sudden we were able to actually go out and solve real crime. Do you know what I mean? Through people drinking in their home, if they were drinking on the street, like sheathing their alcohol in a brown paper bag, it got the police to know that they were still in control by saying, you have to cover it up. But it also allowed people to do what they were doing. And they didn't have to police these stupid laws that the police knew were stupid laws. And you think it was a whole way of getting around a war on drugs. There's a whole speech where they basically say, oh, the war on drugs, once you call something a war, you start to get people to treat the other side like they're in a war. You start to get them to treat them like they're going out to murder these people and attempting to take that war on drugs away. And all of a sudden, you see a 14% reduction in the crime across his district, and you start to see more convictions. And there's the shot of the town where they're sort of like walking down the street, and um everybody's happy in that town. Do you know what I mean? Um like the postmen are able to walk through the town without getting robbed again, and the people are coming out of their houses. They're saying hi to the postman as they're walking down the street. People are saying hello to each other as they're walking by each other and whatever, right? And you think that's a great way of showing and moving all the drug market to these empty houses. You think that maybe that's a way of saying is, if you move the drug markets to places where there are only drug dealers and drug abusers, then that's a way of getting rid of that problem. I guess it's rather short-sighted though, because you don't think about the children that grow up in that place, who might resent that their parents are drug addicts and alcoholics and criminals, and not want to be trapped up in that life. It also doesn't incorporate drug addicts that want to clean up. There's a large section in that where you go, oh, it's a bit short-sighted, but you can see what he was trying to do. And it's crazy for all these people to realize, oh my God, we've had such a reduction in crime. Because, like, can you imagine if, like, what police often seem to do is, well, you were on bloody drugs, so I'm not, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to help you because you were on drugs. I'm not going to listen to you because you were on drugs. And you think, if drugs were legal, that might change a lot of that. Making something legal really does change people's perceptions. And like you'd need to have you'd need to have like a large, what seemingly people do in my community is they go, he's taken LSD or he's taken mushrooms, so now we're going to make him think that he's paranoid through like a basic misunderstanding of what hallucinogenics do. What people seem to do is go, I'm going to make him think that he's paranoid by taking these things that we only allow people to take within our churchy rat community. They don't want people outside of religion to take hallucinogenics because they don't want creation and they don't want creation and they don't want creativity to be rife. If you They want that to be a treat as being a part of religious zealot community. And you think that that's really disgusting. I think that's massively disgusting. If you're not in the church and you take hallucinogenics or you smoke weed, they don't want you to reap the benefits. They want you to stop. So seemingly what they do is they get a bunch of people within their church to follow you around, harass you, and manipulate shit about your life so that people don't want to do what you do. Which is crazy, disgusting, really. But yeah, you think like this is what you think that this way of looking at that problem where they go, in this guy's district, he's managed to clean up crime for like 95% of the city, and he's concentrated by concentrating the drug use to like a little 5% of the city. And you think the fact that all the politicians and police, they don't go, what they don't do, they don't go, wow, look at what he's done for the people. Look at these people's lives who they're now walking about in the sunshine. They're now having a happy life. These people are able to do their jobs in these towns. These people are able to be happy. They don't do that. What they do is they go, wait a goddamn. They go, wait a minute. How can I spin this positively? They go, wait a minute. How can I spin this negatively or positively? How can I use this against my rivals? Or can I use this for my cause? Can I use this against my rival's cause? Can I use this? Or should I burn this person? Who can we put this all on? Who can we blame this all on? Right? I think that's so fucking mad. It's such a crazy thing to go. This person's done a huge service to this town. Potentially, if we roll on what he's done, we can potentially help the whole country. No, what they do instead is they go, how do we fucking murder this person? Do we murder this person or do we glorify this person? Because how are the public perceiving this? Do you know what I mean? How are the public, which we're keeping the public blind. We're keeping the public in the dark on this. We're not letting them know of the reasons why we started a war on drugs in the first place. So how do we get these people that are blind to perceive this? And then when these blind people aren't perceived, like these people with no third eye, these people that are just being told what's going on, how are these people that we're keeping blind and in the dark, however they perceive this, that's what we're going to spin it. That's what we're going to roll with, and we're going to burn whoever they want burned, even though they have no concept of what's actually going on. It's such a fucking corrupt bullshit system that we live in. It's such a disgustingly corrupt bullshit. And this whole story being based on um, something that a police officer and a journalist are basing on a ton of reality and shit that really fucking happened makes you just go, wow, I really don't like the society that I live in. Down to the whole thing where like there's a bit where what's McNulty and fuck, what's the lawyer's name? There's a bit where McNulty and the lawyer go to see that really cringy judge who's like hitting on the lawyer, and you think, and they're saying, no, it's going to take at least a month for us to give you for any wiretap. It takes a month, and you think that's crazy but good. But when they've managed to get a way around this, when they've managed to get a way around um, having their line tapped for doing something that is potentially extremely wrong. Do you know what I mean? You think like, well, why would you still have it take a month to do that? You think that because of basically hierarchy, because of people that aren't informed, people that don't think for themselves, going, no, I need to get my head around this and understand this before I trust the people beneath me. You think it's just a crazy system that we live in, where where a police officer and a lawyer can go and say, we know that these people are doing this stuff. But you think that maybe what that does protect in a little way is, oh, I really want some ice cream. You think what that does protect in a way is it goes, well, um, uh, it stops police from just going, I don't like this person, I want to set them up. You think that maybe that stops? Through a police officer having to go to a lawyer first and then the lawyer having to go to a judge, you think that maybe what that stops is people trying to set up innocent people because they want to steal their wife or something, do you know what I mean? You think that that's probably what that stops there. You think that this is the whole problem with this like law of the jungle thing that the police don't get involved in. They try to stoke the flames to keep us all in a jungle, basically, which just allows corrupt police to control uh, poor people, working class people, people that have drug problems, into carrying out. They basically went, oh yeah, what we need is a neighborhood watch. And then through a neighborhood watch getting out of control, now they've essentially given the police further control over people, where they constantly do this thing where they incite hatred with music like grime or films like Scarface, and they make it look cool to sell drugs and commit violence. And then they manipulate those people into doing what they want to keep them on top of a situation which no one really needs to be on top. And they cause a bunch of fallout, nuclear fallout, with innocent people that are just living life. And it allows corrupt police to essentially control and manipulate a whole bunch of people that aren't doing anything wrong and wasting their lives, completely and utterly wasting human life through pigs from George Orwell's Animal Farm wanting to control life on this earth. It's maddening, sickening, it really is. Anyway, enough about those guys. I can't really remember the mayor's name. He's not that much of a great character. Clay Davis is pretty cool. I can't remember how much Clay Davis was in the series before. You think the whole thing of Stringer wanting to get him shot, but Stringer wants to get him shot through his solicitor telling him that he rain made him, and you think, well, um, I don't know if like Clay Davis is just being Clay Davis. I mean, Stringer was just being Stringer. I don't really know. You think that maybe that's why uh, they orchestrate this murder and this. It's weird that Stringer's the one that gets shot and Avon's the one that ends up in the long prison sentence, though. You know, I think it probably should have been the other way around, but I guess that Stringer was the one going for Omar so much more so. And actually, in this series, like Avon wants to murder people, but he wants to murder people in his world, and Stringer tries to go out of that and tries to murder people in another world. You think that's a very sad tale, really, of Stringer going, but this person's just as corrupt as the people in my world, so why can't I kill him? Do you know what I mean? Stringer's basically saying this person in this other world is just as corrupt as the people in my world, if not more so. Why can't I murder him? You think it's quite poetic with him and Barksdale both wanting to kill each other, and they do it at the same time without the knowledge. Stringer's the one who has gotten Avon trapped up into a long prison sentence, and Avon's the one that's had Stringer killed. You think that it's quite funny for them both to have essentially done the same thing to each other, condemning them to not having a life anymore. Think that's reasonably poetic, you know? Um, Funny that they both find out as well. Omar tells Stringer that your boy gave you up. Stringer knows that it would have been Avon, and McNulty shows Avon that it was Stringer who was the informant on telling them where and when they were going to have a shitload of weaponry and they were going to be gearing up for a war. Reasonably poetic. I'm not sure quite how realistic that would have been though, but reasonably poetic, you know. Um, yeah. What else goes on in this series? Chris and Snoop, there's not too much with them. I've just watched the first episode of series four, and like series four is where Chris and Snoop really, really, really come into their own, man. Chris and Snoop in this series is where you're like sick, sick guys. They are two fucking amazing characters. The only reason you don't like them so much is that they're going against Omar. I can't remember too much, but I think series four and five is where they're going against Omar. I hope Omar doesn't die in series four. I can't remember whether it's series four or five, but yeah, Chris and Snoop are sick characters, man. Uh, Way better than the guy that they work for. Do you know what I mean? Who you think seems to take the props, even though like when you see photos of the actors and actresses from The Wire, and it's like you see him in a lot of photos. You don't see Chris and Snoop in a lot of photos, and you think like strange that even when there are better characters within something, people go, but he is boss. He is better. Do you know what I mean? I guess it doesn't quite work like that because, well, I guess Omar's killing bosses. Bubbles has got a really cool storyline in this one. Bubbles is a strange character where you think like it's acceptable for him to snitch, don't you? You still like Bubbles even though he's a snitch from the start. Even though, like because he's friends with Kima from like school or from when they were young or something. So you think, well, it's sort of all right that and you also think he's had his life ruined from drugs. These people don't give a fuck about him. These people beat the shit out of him and his mate at any opportunity when they're already selling them drugs to ruin their lives. Do you know what I mean? You think like, well, these dealers are going out to fuck up these people's lives. Then when they sort of act out of line, they beat the shit out of them. After or before taking their money to murder them through drug use and drug dealing anyway. You think that's really fucked up? Because I know what my opinion is on drugs, right? But like, I know people on heroin. I know people that are firmly addicted to crack and heroin, firmly just addicted to drugs, firmly just addicted to not being sober, right? Who do drugs, who look, you take one look at them and you go, that's a drug addict. And especially, I used to know them like 15 years ago and they looked like normal people. And at that age, they were in like their early 30s. And they just look, do you know what I mean? They look like normal people. And you heard that maybe they smoked crack a couple of times and shit. And then you see them in their mid 40s and they just look like, um, they almost look like they've lost height and that they are usually about 6 stone soaking wet through. And a lot of them just drop off. A lot of them just drop into the homeless community or death constantly. And whilst they have children and shit, it's really sad. Um, so you think like, yeah, it's pretty fucked up. I mean, I guess that's why a lot of like young people are the ones that sell drugs really, because when people grow older, they realize what it's doing. I personally don't see any problem with selling hallucinogenics, if I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't see any problem in selling hallucinogenics. Weed's a bit of a weird one. Think it makes you fundamentally lazy. I think if you don't abuse any drug, you're fine. I think if you just do crack, you just do heroin, you can do all of these drugs once in a while and be fine. If you do mushrooms, like if you microdose for a couple of months and you leave them alone for 6 months, I don't see a problem with that. If you do LSD and you microdose it for a little bit and you leave it alone for a little bit, I don't see a problem with that. If you smoke or vape DMT once every so often, I don't know what problem there is with that. If you do cocaine once every so often, I don't see a problem with that. The problem is, especially with drugs like cocaine, like when I was doing them. I would have a sip of, if I hadn't drank for a little while, or if I was drinking all the time, I would have a sip of beer and go, I need cocaine and ketamine now, and cigarettes. I could have quit smoking for months. I could have not taken cocaine and ketamine for months, and it would pretty much be though like if I would have a sip of beer, I would need those three introduced into my night at some point. Otherwise, the night was shit. Do you know what I mean? Like fully and shit because like I would be thinking the whole time I would be thinking I want these substances. Do you know what I mean? If I didn't have my own cigarettes, because like I've got mates who would play other games who would like not pay for shit and just take it off other people. Like walk up to people and go, "Oh, here's can I buy a fag off you for a quid?" I don't like those games because I like to be in control of what I have. I don't mind those games when I don't have money. But if I have money, then I'm going to spend it on cigarettes, cocaine, and ketamine, whilst and alcohol because like I don't like wanting something and not being able to have it. It really, really, it ruins my whole night. It's like I can't do what other mates of mine used to do, which is just like ride off what other people have because like it pains me to not have things that I want. If I think that I want something, it indicates to me that I probably want to have that. Do you know what I mean? Like I guess it's some weird thing in my brain wiring where I think I need to have that thing, and because I need to have it so much so, it ruins the rest of my night. And I have no problem with buying. I would rather buy two. I would rather buy an eighth of ketamine and an eighth of cocaine, knowing that it will take me 48 hours to do the eighth of coke at least. It would take me probably 6 hours to do the eighth of ketamine, but like I have no problem with giving out both of those things until they're gone. I have no problem with like not saving any back for myself and just buying more. I have no problem with sharing every last bit of those things until they're gone, until I want more. But I also have no problem with just doing them until I need to sleep and then making them run out at that time. But um, I guess that's a strange way that different people's minds work, isn't it? You know. Also strange that I would see the worst ways that I ever had to deal with addiction were coming off Valium, coming off diazepam. I feel like when I came off opiates at different times, I feel like when I came off dihydrocodeine or like I never really did that much heroin that I never really did that much heroin that I didn't that I really want. I never did heroin and wanted to do it again straight afterwards, if I'm honest with you. And I think that this is the difference between like diazepam and code and dihydrocodeine for me. I do diazepam and I want another one 10 minutes later. I've gotten to the point where I've eaten like plus 15 a day, easy. Whereas with codeine, I never really get like that. It makes me feel too sick. I don't like, I never went into a place with codeine or heroin or dihydrocodeine or any of the opiates where I went, I really want more of that. More often than not, what I did was I bought it because I sort of liked it a little bit or it was all I could get my hands on. And I did it until it was finished and then I was fine and I didn't want to do anymore. Whereas diazepam, I've always done it and I just want more and more and more. And strangely, it, the worst things to come off of were diazepam because it would basically put me in a state where I would just be super depressed for like 3 days. Super, almost like you've got COVID or something. Do you know what I mean? This is what it does to me. I don't need to snap out of that. The thing is for me though is when I'm finished with those substances, I'm finished with them. So like once they've run out, I just go, that's it for that now for a few months. I don't want to do that thing anymore. I just know that I have to ride out 3 days of feeling miserable as fuck. Do you know what I mean? So like for me, what happens is I go, oh well, I have to ride this out where I'm going to have 3 days feeling miserable as fuck, and then I'm going to have about 5 days of getting back on my feet where I'm not really going to do a lot, and then all of a sudden I'm going to start going for walks again. And then after going for walks again, I'm going to do start getting into exercise, whatever, start being productive, whatever, drawing, whatever. Um, and I think, well, however, I don't like. I've never had a sip of beer and gone, I really want diazepam. Because I don't even really like cocaine. That's my experience with drugs anyway. But I don't know why I just went off into a tangent on my experience on drugs. But anyway, with Bubbles, you think like, well, his life is destroyed at this point, right? His family and friends don't want to be his family don't want to be around him because of all the crap he brings to them. Seemingly like stealing from them and shit. I don't think that's come into it yet in this series. I think that might be a series four or series five thing. He tries to clean up, and his sister doesn't want him staying in the basement because she thinks he's just going to steal stuff from her and bring people back to the house and whatever, steal all the copper wiring and whatever. Um, So you think, yeah, really strange. Really, so you don't mind that he's a snitch almost. I personally never watched it and thought I hate that he's a snitch. I watched both sides of the game, and you just understand. You watch all sides of it, and you just understand how these people are trapped up into it. Do you know what I mean? For me, the police are just as bad as the criminals. The criminals are just as bad as the junkies. For me, the junkies are the best ones because at least you don't mind so much that the junkies are controlled by substances. Do you know what I mean? In my mind, I go, well, I don't. I think that they've been trapped up into a poison, whereas I think the other two groups of people are just pieces of shit. Do you know what I mean? Junkies tend to be decent people if they're not doing drugs, whereas police and criminals, they're not decent. They're doing those things out of a want to do those things. Do you know what I mean? I guess, and on both sides, you do get decent people and bad people. You get some people who are just trapped up into that life of drug dealing and criminality. Some of the people you don't look at those characters and you think, well, that's a bad person. You think that's for the most part that's why they usually survive the whole thing. And the same in the police. I was thinking the difference the other day between like Carver and I can't remember his partner. I don't remember what Carver's partner's name is, but Carver's partner is very much like he wants to tell everybody that he beats the shit out of the hoppers and shit. Do you know what I mean? Like he wants the police he wants the kids to be fucked up, right? He wants to inflict physical pain on these kids. He also rats on Bunny Coleman to the journalists. And Bunny's a decent person. So this is why, like, when people rat on Avon or when people rat on these people that have killed like 30 people, you think like, well, they were murderers, rapists, heroin dealers. Do you know what I mean? Making millions off dealing heroin to people in their community. You think like, well, you deserve getting ratted on. When Bunny gets ratted on, you think that's not cool. Do you know what I mean? You're like, for me, what I thought was like, that's not really okay. And I guess that shows in the consequences of what happens to them. Carver starts to put more time into his community. He starts playing basketball with the kids. He taxes all the drug dealers who are firing their young ones. When they're in that legal community, he fires all the young drug dealers because he says he doesn't need them anymore. So Carver goes around and taxes them all and gives the money back to the young guys, and then he's playing he starts putting up like basketball hoops and shit for them, and he wants them to play basketball. He wants them to go boxing with Cutty, and he ends up becoming a commissioner in series 5, I believe. I think that one of the closing scenes is seeing him getting his super stripes. Do you know what I mean? And like he's getting that super uniform, whereas the other guy, the guy that ratted on Bunny, he's sacked, and he's now a security guard. And you think that like that's how that shit works, right? When you get down to it, like a lot of the stuff within those communities, they're not black and white. You know, some stuff they do just literally make them black and white, and some stuff they go, this isn't black and white. Do you know what I mean? Carver did some shit that was a little bit suspect in his earlier days, but when he grew up a bit and when Bunny gave him some advice on being a real police officer and knowing what was going on in his community, he really tried to work with the kids to try to get them into a better life. And he tried to and he used his power that he could wield over the drug dealers in getting them to take care of the young ones that were getting trapped up into this lifestyle. And for that, he got his super promotion, you know. And for the guy that just wanted to beat the kids up and then sold out his boss, who was a good person, he gets sacked and put into he gets sacked and he now just works as a security guard and he hates it. So yeah, you feel like there's some good shit in there, really. Trying to think of anything else. But so Bubbles, like, yeah, it's always a sad story with Bubbles because he always got a smile on his face and he's always happy, but his life is like fucked up, and you know that he's only happy because he's taking drugs. There's some way better moments with Bubs in the later series. Looking into their lives was a little bit depressing. Donnie Andrews, who Omar's character is based on, seems to be okay. takes photographs with all the cast of The Wire and shit, and like seems to have maybe come out of it okay. Whereas Bubbles, the guy that Bubbles was based on, is dead. They never released his true identity because his family didn't want the. I guess what would have happened to them if they if it was found out that their kid was a rat in their community. But his character apparently just died um, of a disease he caught from sharing needles, and you think that's really sad, man. You know, and you think for them to have painted him in such a good light. And you think for the two people to have painted him in such a good light, you think they must have actually really liked him as a person and thought that he was a really decent person. Him trying to clean up, I think he tries to clean up a load of other addicts. I think he does kill someone at one point, but that person is killing a bunch of other people. But yeah, like you're also the intellect that he had. And that is apparently based on his real character as well. He had what they call like I think they call it an eidetic mind. I can't remember how you say that, but apparently he had like a photographic memory, and he could pick out the tiniest like bits of information about the faces of the people that these people were looking for. Yeah, he really wanted to do well. He wanted Johnny to be good, so to speak. That character Johnny, he wanted him to. He really tried to help him. He really tried to help Johnny to. He also really tried to help him to get out of running the like rip and run scams that he was running. He wanted him to be a better person. So you feel bad for Bubbles and all of that. I can't remember how Bubbles' story dies in the series. I know in real life he died. I can't remember how it ends in the series. But yeah, series three, good series. Not quite as exciting as I remember it, if I'm honest with you. But it might be because I've seen it at least like twice. But series four, starting watching the first episode of that, and I'm already thinking like, yeah, this was a great series. All the kids that it brings into it are really cool, man. But yeah, so all in all, I would say series three of The Wire, uh, great, great series. Um, yeah, did some there's some great shit in there, really. Um, Great characters, great storylines, great people that you want to root for on all sides. It's another one of those things where, like, hopefully you think shows like that have brought those communities together. You sort of do need more working together in those communities to get out the real pieces of shit, don't you? Like, if people are unavoidably going to take drugs, then what you need is drug dealers that aren't pieces of shit. If you can't legalize drugs because then you'll get 12-year-olds able to get their hands on like fucking an almost infinite amount of LSD and heroin and have them before they're fully grown and they see any of the impacts of what those things do to people that abuse them. Um, if you give though if you give kids the ability to get which if stuff's we could get our hands on booze before we could get our hands on A-class drugs. I don't think that's actually the same now. We were doing A-class drugs at 16. There were kids in my school doing pills at 14. Do you know what I mean? It I think actually it's just as easy to get hold of alcohol as it is pills. Strangely, I used to buy alcohol off a guy that used to go to my school. I don't think he quite knew how old he was, but I had a beard at like 15. I had like pube stubble at 15. I was shaving my sides, do you know what I mean? And my shoulders have always been quite broad, even though I didn't touch a gym until I was like 28. I didn't lift one weight until I was 28, but like my back and my shoulders have always been quite big. So I think that I just looked like a bit. Well, I could get served in most shops for cigarettes and booze, and the rest of my friends had links for drugs, and I could always get hold of weed. You think that a lot of kids can get hold of illegal drugs just as easy as they can get hold of booze, but again, it's about that not wanting them to overdo it, isn't it? Like I've also seen people do too much acid, and like they're not. It's almost like they're not human anymore. And then I've seen people doing people get trapped up on different addictions, and they lose their soul almost like they're not a human being anymore. And the same with like police and drug dealers. I guess that what you want from shows like this is you want to go, I like that police officer, I like that criminal, I like that addict. And you think that what that does is it sets up a healthy attitude for police officers and criminals. If you have drug dealers that aren't bad people, if you have drug dealers that don't want to, I've been into drug dealers' houses where they've had a disabled guy tied with a washing with the line of a, like shit that you hang your clothes on, tied round this disabled like 50-year-old's neck, and they were walking him round the house on a lead, recording it and pissing themselves laughing. And you think you don't want those people in the drug dealing community, do you? Do you know what I mean? You think that's fucked up, man. You also don't want police that will go out and make it their life to push somebody into committing violent crime because they once stood up for their mate that was reduced to tears through some people that were bullying them with physical violence. You don't want people that will go out to try to destroy someone's life because they think that Jesus saves, and when their female mate got punched in the face in front of them, they got into a fight over it. Do you know what I mean? You think police that go out to destroy people's lives like that, you think they shouldn't be fucking policemen. Do you know what I mean? Shouldn't be fucking police officers, they're scum. People that carry out personal vendettas because they have the ability to, scum. People that want to destroy the life of children, or you think scum, you know. Um, I don't quite know what the equivalent is for addicts, really. I've never really seen addicts do much more than hurt themselves, if I'm honest with you. Steal food from supermarkets and shit, like, but the majority of them just get onto food bank vouchers and shit. So, like, you really don't think that there's too much of a fucking problem with that. Um, they're raised in places that are like ghettos have always been. Ghetto means government operation in order to see how they can make human beings behave. Do you know what I mean? That's literally what ghetto means. So you think you definitely can't blame the addicts in that situation, really, for turning to what is essentially self-medication through having a health service that doesn't provide for those people. You think this people has a brain? These people have a brain where they're self-medicating because eating sugary substances makes us happier, release serotonin. They were trained with that from when they were a kid, so now they seek medication that also helps them forget whatever pain they're going through, pain and monotony they're going through. Yeah, but you think that, like, hopefully for criminals and for police, they get to watch shows like this and see that on all sides there are decent people and on all sides there are pieces of shit, you know? Anyway, yeah, that was my also great writing and great acting. I don't think that you know what's weird with the acting is um there are so many actors in this show that do such a phenomenal role. There are some cheesy bits. There was a lesbian sex scene that, while pretty hot, was also like with Kima, and I thought this is cheesy as fuck. But I haven't watched porn for about 6 months, and I haven't had sex for like a year, so it definitely turned me on. But I didn't think that is cheesy as fuck. So there's some bits that like come off a little bit cheesy, but you're obviously going to get that when a show's 20 years old, you know. The fact that there's only like one or two cheesy moments in per series for a show that's 20 years old, that shows how well it's aged. And you think there are so many phenomenal actors in this. Actors, actresses, just actors, I don't know how you refer to them. So much phenomenal writing. And you think a lot of these actors and actresses didn't really go on to do too much more than The Wire. And you think that that's a really crazy thing to see, to think there are so many average actors that make so much money and are constantly working, and then there are these phenomenal actors and actresses that don't get the same fame and amount of money, you know? It's mad. It's crazy, man. But yeah, all in all, great show, great directing, great acting, everything to do with it is great. I think the only thing that's a little bit of a problem is this whole thing with the theme tune. You have to keep a devil down in that hole and shit, and you think. I think that you need to stop seeing people as defined by these biblical assertions of what a person is. And I think that that's the thing that holds Bunny Coleman back later. In this whole thing, if you have to keep a devil down in the hole, it's basically a way of saying when we have people committing satanic traits, we put them into either the policing system, the criminal system, or they're addicts. Do you know what I mean? And you think, why aren't you seeing that these traits are pushed onto people? Why aren't you seeing that these people can quite clearly be much more than these simple allegorical definitions of human traits, human behavior, human psychology? Why are we confining people to what a fucking book that was written thousands of years ago says about people? It's fucking insane. These people are so much more than that. And it's just the same with how uh, Bunny is portrayed because through moving all of that into through moving all of the crime to one area, he's essentially condemning all of those people to a life of crime rather than ever saying that they can be saved and that they can go into a life full of fulfillment in a world that is not so flooded with drugs, booze, and prostitution, death, violence, imprisonment, you know. Anyway, yeah, big fan. Big fan of that show and everyone that had anything to do with it.